effective critical thinking skills underlie not just this course, but any course you'll be taking here in college. This slideshow will introduce you to some basic concepts of critical thinking, as well as to the rhetorical situation, which we'll elaborate on for the rest of Unit 1. First, what is critical thinking? Ultimately, critical thinking is skepticism. Part of being critical is to never accept as truth anything that you haven't carefully analyzed or deconstructed. This means that you should develop a skeptical approach towards your own attitude, your own assumptions, and your own evidence. We'll use those three words a lot throughout the remainder of the course. But what this means is just because you believed something your entire life and you've accepted something as true since your childhood doesn't mean that you can't question it or that you shouldn't question it, in an academic setting. We're not going to ask you to change your beliefs. We're just asking you to think about your beliefs, to analyze your beliefs, and to figure out ways of bolstering your understanding through skepticism. This means you must question your own attitudes, assumptions, and evidence before you begin to start questioning the arguments or attitudes, assumptions, and evidence of others. The first step in skeptical criticism is investigation. On a basic level, investigation needs a structure to be effective and useful. We call that structure a heuristic. By the book, a heuristic is a method or process of adopting ideas. The emphasis here is on process, which you might have noticed is the central theme of this course. One idea leads to another, and so on. In order to develop an effective heuristic for analysis of an idea, you should try to establish its topic, or topos. In the classical tradition, the topoi are definition, comparison, relationship, testimony, and in writing, these topics loosely translate to genres. You should keep in mind that it's important to understand the topoi as well as what a heuristic means and what your own heuristic is for approaching the arguments of others and your own arguments before you begin creating texts of your own. It will save you a lot of time and will be more consistent in your ability to persuade an audience. What is rhetoric? You might hear the word rhetoric used often incorrectly in news media as a pejorative, but ultimately rhetoric is the use of language to persuade, inform, educate, or entertain. Now, language is a fairly broad term. What do you think counts as language? This is a question for you to think about. Is math rhetorical? Is science rhetorical? Are images rhetorical? We'll discuss these as the course goes on. But keep in mind that language and texts have much broader definitions than you're probably used to using. The rhetorical situation relies on another trope that we call the rhetorical triangle. You might have heard this before. The rhetorical triangle is a balance of logos, pathos, and ethos. If you look at the roots of these words, you might be able to define them. Logos, the root logo, is based in logic or facts. This is the components of rhetoric that are based on objective truths, things that we know are facts. The earth is a sphere. 1 + 2 = 3. These are based in logos. Pathos is based in emotion, path being the root of that word. So this is the emotional appeal to the audience. How do you get their heartstrings? How do you appeal to their sensibilities as humans? And finally, ethos is appeal to authority. Etho being the root. This is your trustworthiness, your authority on an issue, and your credibility. And every rhetorical situation has to balance these three pieces of the rhetorical triangle. We'll talk about them more as the course goes on. The most fundamental part of the rhetorical situation, as you develop heuristics to investigate and criticize your attitudes, means that you must consider how each of the things in this list impact your perception. Some qualities that might impact the rhetorical situation include age, experience, gender, location, culture, politics, religion, and education. And I'm sure you can think of other things. These are biases, these are assumptions, things that you probably hold close to your heart, but don't necessarily think about how they impact your perception of the world around you and the way you try to persuade others around. To bring us to our textbook definition of the rhetorical situation, you can also think of the rhetorical situation in more practical terms as the purpose, audience, genre, stance, and media design of a text or some kind of artifact. We'll talk more about these as well as other methods or matrices for approaching the rhetorical situation. But with this in mind, you should read chapters 1 through 5 of the Norton textbook and develop a better understanding of purpose, audience, genre, stance, and media and how they relate to writing.